believe it or not, it is only week 2 of editing for the web. Where we left off, which seems like many, many moons ago, was where you guys submitted your proposal presentations for the Real Deal Taco fictitious website building scenario. We're going to pick up where we left off this week. We're going to be moving into the realm of, content development strategies and design considerations. We're going to talk at the end of this lecture about the activities that you have to look forward to this week. But I want to talk a little bit about the web as an interactive medium for sharing content and different types of considerations that we have when working in such an environment like that. Because the web is something that we make decisions about how we navigate, we create content in different ways for that. So, as you know, I like to kind of throw a broad question out there to the group and just ask, what did you do online today? Anybody can shout out whatever they did. Went to Facebook. Checked email.
Heard of a news story.
Read a news story. Checked Twitter.
Instagram, Twitter.
Lots of social media happening. Anything, Robert? Same exact things. All right, so we had kind of a collection of responses. Let me think what I did. I did email. I sent documents to get printed from the UPS store. I initiated a return of a Hawaiian shirt that I ordered on Amazon for a party that I'm going to, and I needed a Hawaiian shirt for, so I got the return order for that. I checked into FSO. I looked at a few websites that I'm helping clients develop, so a broad array of things. I asked the question to this because generally you're going to get a lot of different types of answers. So we heard things like read a news article, different types of entertainment type things. People are now using social media quite a bit for entertainment, but shopping, booking vacations, getting directions, researching different things. There's such a broad array of things that people can do online. And I highlight this because even with the diversity in those answers, people generally use the web to do one of 3 things. Now, these are broad categories, and sometimes they can overlap, but they are on the web to satisfy a goal of some kind, to complete a task, or to get questions answered, right? And so let's throw the social media example out there. Which category do you think social media falls into? Entertainment, but of these categories. Satisfy goals, right? The goal to get connected, the goal to communicate with friends, the goal to lurk somebody's account, the goal just to get up to date on something, right? For me, when I was printing out my Amazon return label, I was completing a task. When I sent that file to the UPS store to get printed, completing a task. I'm trying to see if there were any getting answer examples. I can't think of any based upon what you guys said, but yes, sir. The news article. All right, so when he was reading the news article, that might have a couple of different goals, right? There might be a couple of different purposes. You might be trying to get answers about something you're curious about, but sometimes people read the news. Maybe their goal is to become informed. Maybe their goal is just distraction, like I'm bored, I'm sitting at a red light, so I'm going to read this article. These motivations can fall into more than one category, but you can see how, just based upon what we shared here in the room, that we can affirm that people use the web to do one of these 3 things, right? And when that happens, when we know that this is why people come to websites, our websites should anticipate why people are there. Ask the question, why do people come to this site? Why do users, visitors, clients, customers come to this site? We anticipate those questions and make sure that the sites that we design provide those answers, right? So web content must anticipate users' questions and be designed and laid out to support them in their mission for that. Now, this is going to seem kind of meta, like, mostly you're just probably thinking, I want it to look pretty on the page. I'm just going to take whatever content that the client has provided me in this folder and I'm going to slap it up there. There's more to your job than that. Of course, like if that is the only service that you want to provide, then that is a basic level service that you are giving your client. But if you want to put another layer of meaning and value on what you're doing, you're not just going to take that Word document that's filled, from top to bottom with all of this text and just copy and paste it from one environment to the next. You're going to take a look at it and say, this is too much text. I think I should put an image here. I'm going to streamline this information because nobody's going to read this much, and maybe do a pull quote here to break up the page visually. I think maybe a testimonial supporting this might look good here. So you can see the different levels of just taking information from one place and replicating it exactly somewhere else versus, okay, you've given me all this in a Word document and it seems fine in a Word document, but we're putting it on a web page and there's so much more possibility for that information in terms of rich visualization and communication than just a copy-paste job. What this requires you to do is to know your audience. Right? And so like as a web strategist on a project, it is very important for you guys to know who you're building the site for. Of course, you're building it for the client, but they're trying to reach a certain audience of people. And the more you know about that audience, the more strategic decisions that you can make about how to lay that content out. Let's use the Real Deal Taco scenario just for a second, right? People are coming to this site for what reasons? What do we know about this audience? Why would people come to the Real Deal Taco site? Stacy.
My first thought would be if you see it, you would want to know what their menu is before you go up.
Okay, so they want to know what's on the menu. Absolutely. Anybody else? Why else would someone go to the Real Deal Taco site? Dylan.
Find out where they're at.
To find out where they're at. This is a mobile business, and so that information, it's not like it's on the same corner all day, every day, right? It's moving around, so people will want to know, is this taco food truck outside my university today? Because I want to go and get that awesome gluten-free Baja fish taco, right? And so if you know that the two most important things potentially that people are coming to the Real Deal Taco site for are the menu, food items, what do we serve, and the locations, you'll know to put that information in a place of prominence and to make it very intuitive of where to go for that, right? Because you know that that's what your audience is looking for. So you want to make it easy for them to find what they're looking for. That is supporting them in their mission for coming to the site. All right, we're segueing just a little bit here to talk about, like, as we are thinking about how to position information on a page and how to lay content out and how to be thoughtful about like what to put and where, it's important to, again, come back to this conversation of the web as an interactive medium, right? And this understanding that the content that we share there is something that people make choices about all the time, right? And so again, here I am with my broad question for you. How do people read online? If you have a hunch, let me know. Dylan.
Like, by read, do you mean like what do they use to read, or how do they read?
Brandon.
Basically, I know when I go online, if there's something online, I'm looking to see, okay, what is this very specific thing? So I guess you could say they skim for the most important stuff.
Skim for the most important stuff. Well, that was a trick question because they don't read. They mostly scan, just like what you said, Brandon. Because when I am coming to a website, I am on a mission, right? I'm not there to passively consume everything that you have laid out for me. I'm not going to go through that site page by page and read every single word that you've put on there and look at every single picture and click every single link. I am there because I want to know, does Real Deal Taco have gluten-free options? I don't care what you've put on the About page. I don't care what that testimonial says. Because I am there, my mission is to find out if you guys have gluten-free options, right? And so I'm scanning I'm scanning. I'm thinking, okay, intuitively, where might I find out this information? Probably on the menu. So that's where I'm first going to go. I'm going to bypass your homepage completely. I probably won't even click anywhere else if it says gluten-free on the menu. So I'm going on the menu, and now I'm looking for something that communicates whether or not you have that. And I'm not reading every single ingredient in every single menu item. That's too much. I'm busy. I'm probably just looking at this for 5 seconds before I make the decision whether or not I'm going to go to the truck. So I'm scanning it. I'm scanning it for the words gluten-free or some sort of symbol that indicates that that is an option, right? And so you guys have an exercise that is going to be due tomorrow night. It's called Writing for the Web. And in this, you are going to watch a Lynda that's actually incredibly informative, very similar in terms of the usefulness of the information to the Lynda that you watched in week 1. What they're talking about with content strategy is applicable to websites and beyond. It's thoughtful, right? This Writing for the Web Lynda is also very thoughtful that you can apply this stuff well beyond just this Real Deal Taco scenario, obviously, and beyond building websites into just like how do you think about and share content online. But one of the things that they are going to reiterate for you is the idea that people aren't reading everything on there. It's not like a book where you're sitting down to immerse yourself in an experience and absorb every word that the author has put there. I got to find something out, and I've got to find it out fast. And your job as a web strategist is to figure out what is the quickest, easiest pathway to that information for your target audience. All right, knowing that I'm not reading everything on your website, there are different considerations that you should take, right? Your content that you develop for websites needs to be concise, and it needs to be scannable, and it needs to be timely and relevant so I have confidence in that information, and it needs to be as objective as possible so that I can make the decision about whether or not I want what you're selling, so to speak, right? Now, one of the things that we should also take into consideration is usability. There's this guy by the name of Jakob Nielsen. He is a usability expert, and he does tons of studies, and they're so cool. Like if you look him up, his work is renowned in user experience circles. He's done some studies that show that given the average time that users spend on a web page, that they have the time to read at most 28% of the words on the screen, but 20% is more likely. So if I'm looking at a screen, at most, I'm getting 28% of the content that's on there, because it's all useless to me unless it contains that one piece of information that was going to satisfy my goal, that's going to answer my question, or that is going to satisfy a goal, answer a question. What was the other one? Complete a task. Well done, Dylan. All right, so Jakob Nielsen did this other study, which is an eye tracking study. And so they map people's eye movements as they're looking at information on a web page. And one of the things that he consistently found is that people scan web pages in a rough F-shaped pattern, right? And so we can see by looking at this image, the areas that are kind of like the orange or the bright red are intensely focused. The yellow, it kind of like dies out, and then the purple is just like a very quick, glaze over area. And so what this tells us is that web content is absorbed differently than print content or just like watching a movie content, right? Because it is absorbed differently, we must develop it differently, right? Understanding how people take it in should inform how we design it or how we develop it or how we, create it. That the first couple of paragraphs of a web page is going to get the most attention, as we could see back from here, right? Because in English, we read from left to right. So at the top of the page, reading from left to right is where most people spend their visualization time, or their scanning time is where that starts on the page. And so if you've got something that's an important piece of information or content, it needs to go up there instead of burying it 5 paragraphs down in a bunch of dense paragraph text, right? Another thing that we can see from, this F-shaped pattern is that, yes, people are spending the most time at the top, going from left to right, but then we can see at a certain point, they start this thing called like a vertical plummet, or a vertical scan. Their eyes are just going down the page because they're looking for something that they haven't found, right? By scanning left to right. So now they're looking down the page for headings or subheadings or something that's descriptive or emphasized to get me to kind of pause, like a speed bump that says, wait a second, don't scan any further. This paragraph might contain the useful bit of information that you're looking for, right? And so a couple of weeks ago, if you can remember that far back, in the 7 Deadly Sins lecture, we talked about breaking up dense paragraph text by inserting headings and subheadings that are descriptive of the content that's found there. That way, if a user is scanning the information and they see something that's relevant to their search, their goal, their mission, they'll stop and spend a little bit more time in that area. So you want to use information-rich keywords in your headings and your subheadings and bulleted lists to grab people's attention while they're scanning, right? So that is a way that you can support people on their mission, is to not just give me like paragraph after paragraph after paragraph of dense text, because I'm not going to read it. Right? And so let's say Real Deal Tacos gives you a Word document that has about like 5 or 6 paragraphs of dense paragraph text. Are you doing a service to the target audience that you're trying to reach by copying and pasting that dense text from the Word document and putting it the same way right on a web page? You are not, because they're not going to read all of that. So what might you do to help the owner communicate what it is that they want to communicate, but also help that user in scanning that information? What might you do?
Read it yourself and break it apart based on how you should go.
Okay, so you could read it, maybe try to summarize or streamline the information. That's one thing that you can do. And the writing for the web, lynda.com, that you're going to watch will give you some ideas or some strategies about that. What else might you do? Do you remember when we were looking at the slides for the 7 Deadly Sins lecture, and I talked about breaking up content into bulleted lists because it would be easier to read or easier to scan or easier to reference. And I showed you what one of your activities in FSO looks like if it was just one paragraph of text, and then what it would look like if I went back and I was thinking about you guys as my users, trying to, cross-reference requirements in the activity, and how I could make that easier for you when you're doing your homework was to break it up into sections and then bullets within that section so that you could very easily scan for the part that you were looking for, reference the key points, not in paragraph form, but in bullet points, to get the information that you guys need to complete your task, which is to do an assignment. I know I'm getting kind of meta with that, but I'm bringing this example back in because I want you to see that as an instructor, I think about your user experience of the content that I want to share with you. That takes the form of assignments. But in this Real Deal Taco scenario, you guys are taking the user experience of hungry customers into consideration and taking the information that Real Deal Tacos, the business, has given you and making decisions about how can I lay this information out in a way that would make it easier or delightful for the user to find what it is that they're looking for. Brandon.
With breaking up text, I was just thinking about this since you did bring up how everything can be bulleted.
Mm-hmm.
Would using stuff like bolded text or italicized text be considered as part of that as well?
Okay, so the question for those of you listening in the online audience, just to make sure that you heard it, is would the use of bold text or italicized text be a way to differentiate within, within paragraphs? What I'll say is this: bold and italicized is a visual style that you add to give emphasis to a certain chunk of text. If you overuse that, then you lose the emphasis, right? If everything is bold, nothing is bold. If everything is italicized, nothing is italicized. Does that make sense? It's not going to stand out if it all looks that way. Now, that being said, if there was a certain area that you just wanted to bold a couple of words for something, that would stand out if the rest of the text was not bolded. But what I encourage more than bolding or underlining or italicizing certain bits of text is the organization of your content into content chunks, right? Think about like, I'm going to call this section, by this heading, and then I'm only going to include 3 to 4 sentences underneath that heading. Because I know people aren't going to read tons of paragraph text. So then I'm going to start a new section, and I'm going to title this section something descriptive of the content found in that. That way, if people are scanning this to try and find a bit of information, they can jump from heading to heading to heading and know which paragraph they need to spend more time at. Does that make sense? All right. So, interactive medium. This means people just make choices about how to absorb the content or how to approach it or how to navigate it, right? And I think that at this point, it would be beneficial in our discussion to do a quick comparison of print media and the web. So we can take a look at the differences between the two and how developing content for print has certain considerations versus developing content for an online environment, which has its own. In looking at these two separate environments, I've kind of put these categories up. And we're going to discuss what it looks like in both and to talk about just a few considerations for each. So I say that the web is digital, but print is analog. What do you think I might mean by that?
Connected, not connected?
Okay. Connected or not connected, that's one way to put it.
The web is, you can grasp it from a computer or anywhere online, whereas a print, you kind of have to go.
Okay, so you can grab it from an online, information online versus anywhere online versus, having a hard copy. Dylan?
Controlling how people view it in print is you get to decide exactly how it's being viewed, whereas with the web you don't.
Yep, so in case somebody didn't hear that response, is controlling how people get to view the information, whereas on the web you don't necessarily get to control how someone views it, depending upon the device that they're using, whether it's a smartphone or a large cinema display. The content's going to render differently, especially if it's designed for mobile environments or to be mobile responsive, versus print, which you can pixel perfect the design. You have much more of a granular level of control of how someone sees whatever it is that you want to show them. Because if you were even looking at my monitor, we can see it here in the classroom. The way this looks on my monitor of my laptop is different than what you see up here on the screen. And the reason for that is the dimensions, but also because of the color settings. Like, things look way more washed out on this cinema display. Versus I'm looking at it here on mine, I'm like, there's plenty of color contrast on my machine. But when we're looking at it up here on the cinema display, I'm kind of like, it looks kind of washed out. Because I can't control how you're viewing it in this digital environment. One of the other things I want to highlight about this is that the information that we're sharing in this digital environment is much more useful. And can be reused and remade and remixed and stolen and re-edited in countless ways. I can, right click on that picture, save it to my desktop, take it into Photoshop, do whatever I want with it, copy and paste the text from this web page and mix it with text from this one and come up with my own content altogether. And it's very editable in that sense, versus once you print those words on the page, not quite as easy to change, remaster, or remix in the same sort of way. It's a little more hard copied, right? The web is a non-linear experience versus print being a linear one. Now, there's going to be exceptions always to these, and when we think of them, we'll point them out and highlight them. But what do you think I mean by that? Non-linear, linear. Dylan.
The way you look at print is more of a, like, you look at it in like a specific order. There's a certain way for you to look at this and understand it and read it. Whereas with the web, it's, you can go to a home page, and then you can go to the menu, but you can also look at the About Me first.
Yep.
And so it has to have more navigational, like,
That's right.
friendliness to that, where you don't feel like you're being forced into a certain thing.
Okay.
Because on the web, you're not supposed to be forced into a certain thing.
So just to kind of reiterate the point that Dylan just very beautifully made, is that linear experiences in print means you go from one thing to the next, and it's prescribed, right? You start in a book at chapter 1, and then you read chapter 2, and then you read chapter 3. Obviously, it's different in a choose your own adventure scenario. Obviously, it's different for, let's say, Encyclopedia Britannica, because I don't have to read the entire thing if I just want to flip to the E's and go to Einstein, right? That would be a good exception to highlight. Versus the web, you know, you said it so beautifully. I land on the home page, but where I go next is entirely, up to me, and I don't have to go, from the home to the about to the services. I can just jump straight to the contact page, if that supports me most in my mission for what I'm doing on that site. The web is a user-driven experience, where print is more author-driven. Now, so this goes hand in hand with linear and non-linear. User-driven means I decide where I want to go, versus author-driven means they decide how I proceed through the material or the content. The author has written that book so that chapter 1 is necessary to understand chapter 2, and vice versa. Versus on the web, I get to decide. And I decide based on my own intuition about what it is that I need, want, or I'm looking for, and the options that you've made available to me on the site. The web is more active in the sense that, like, you're constantly clicking around and making different decisions, versus print. And, when I'm talking about print here, I am very kind of generally thinking like chapter novel type of a thing, right? And so, we talked about, all of the things that we do online every day. It's very active. Even from like the manual, like physical movements that we're having to make by clicking around or flipping on our phones or that sort of things, or swiping or doing whatever. And I don't know about you guys, but like for me, if I'm working on my computer until late in the evening, I don't get tired. Because there's something that is keeping me focused, and something that's keeping me energized by making decisions, right? And having things interact with me as I'm going along. There is, like an action and a reaction on the page. The action is I'm clicking something. The reaction is that something new is loading up. Then my reaction to that is scanning. And then maybe another action is clicking, and then that whole process starts over again. It's very stimulating. Versus print, a little bit more passive. You're sitting down to read a book, and you're there to kind of take everything in and not make so many choices, or to be so stimulated by the process. I don't know about you guys, but you give me a book to read after a certain period of time at night, and I'm like out like a light. For me, that is so passive that it calms me down to the point that it can make me feel sleepy. The web is more casual in its language, and the reason why that is because the web has democratized access to information. Back in the day, books were only for like rich people. Only rich people had books, and if you were rich, you also had an education. Right? And so the language that things were written in assumed that if you can read, you have an education, so I'm going to write at a higher level of articulation, using higher words, more academic words, or, like a larger, more in-depth vocabulary of words. Versus the web, like, it has made it so basically the sum total of human knowledge is available to anybody with an internet connection. And because of that, like the language that we use to describe things or to, write things on the web needs to be able to be read, if you can read, by someone with a third grade reading level. Obviously, you tailor the content to your target audience, right? If it's a more academic site or a more professional site, the language or the reading level is going to be higher. But just know that just because you have a website that has very stringently academic writing doesn't mean that only academics are looking at it, right? Because anybody can access it at that point. I think that the web is the future, but I think that print is still the future too, and not just for like I'm going to hold on to the past, but that we are seeing with more and more digital media, people's attention spans like just shrinking down, and for anything that requires intense study or intense focus, people want more printed materials to hold in their hand, to highlight, to write notes in the margin, things of that nature, because a lot of times being online offers also a certain level of distractibility. Because even if I'm sitting here trying to do something like that requires a lot of focus, I just heard the ding that I've got another email message. One of my coworkers has probably just posted something on WhatsApp that doesn't even have anything to do with work, but I'm still looking at it and it's just another cute cat picture or something. And all of a sudden I've been taken away from this important thing that I need to concentrate on. So a lot of times people will get off their digital devices to have that intense focus or that intense learning that requires no distractions whatsoever. The reason why I share this with you guys is because understanding the medium will help you make better choices about how to design and lay content out in it, right? So, developing content, best practices. Here's just a few. Some of this is a reiteration of things that I said in the 7 Deadly Sins, but I find that it's good to revisit this now because as you're kind of getting into the scenario, you see this project that you're going to build for Real Deal Tacos, your ideas about this are expanding because you're seeing now how you're going to apply this. And so instead of it just being like, something that I mentioned at the start of the month, some of these things you will immediately be able to see, oh, if I do this, this will be the effect in my project. All right, you want to embrace this medium. Right? You know that people aren't going to read everything, so you make it scannable, and you make it scannable by not including dense paragraph text, but by leveraging headings, subheadings, and bulleted lists. You know that this is a user-driven environment, and that it is active and that it is non-linear. And so because of that, you need to provide intuitive navigational systems. And your navigational systems need to be consistent and static from page to page, meaning that in your header and in your nav bar with your links, that stuff stays consistent on the home page, to the about page, to the services page. It doesn't jump locations, it doesn't change options from page to page, because that is my map for how I am going to jump and understand how to jump from page to page. That area needs to remain static. It's kind of like a home base kind of a thing. I can always go back there to know the other options for me to jump around or to move around on the site. What you call those things need to be intuitive, so that like I have an idea of the content that I'm going to find on that page just by what you've named that navigational link, right? I've had students in the past with the Real Deal Taco scenario put all of the food items and the prices under services. Now, to me, that's not as intuitive as calling something the menu, right? If I'm going to the Real Deal Taco site and I'm looking for gluten-free options, I'm not going to think to go to the services page first. So that is not as intuitive of a title for that link, right? I have students who really want to showcase the locations of the Real Deal Taco site, because that is one of the very most important pieces of information that these users are going to come and try and find. Where is this truck located today at lunch? But they decide that they want to title the page Contact, right? A more intuitive title for that might just be Locations, right? Because even though Contact potentially it's fitting, it's not as intuitive as Locations. There are different formatting considerations that you guys need to keep in mind. We talked about how that F-shaped pattern should inform where you're putting your most important bits of content. Think about how people start that vertical plummet on the page when they're not finding what they're looking for. If you're putting headings or subheadings, they act as speed bumps that get people to kind of like stop. And okay, is the information that I'm looking for in this paragraph? No, keep going. The other way that you get people to absorb your content online is to be breaking up that text with other types of elements. Multimedia resources like pictures or videos or graphics or icons or horizontal rules or data tables or pull quotes. Any number of things that you can insert in that page so that it's just not straight up paragraph text. And then the other thing about it is that, like I said, the web contains the sum total of human knowledge. Basically, you can find practically anything you ever wanted to know about anything. So your website or Real Deal Taco's website doesn't have to provide every bit of information that they aren't like an expert on, right? They can link out to another source. For example, Real Deal Tacos prides themselves on serving organic ingredients or using organic produce. They can simply state that in their keywords or like in their copy, right? We pride ourselves on using only the freshest, locally sourced organic ingredients from nearby farms, right? If you want to learn more about XYZ farm, visit their site at such and such. Real Deal Tacos doesn't need to reiterate everything that can be found on XYZ farms. Real Deal Tacos website doesn't have to reiterate every benefit of organic food because someone can just type in whatever specific search they have about that and go to a website that is a more credible authority on that. Does that make sense? All right. So when we talk about this medium, we talk about streamlining the content to support the user and their mission. We talk about being intuitive with the choices because I get to decide how to poke around on this site, how to navigate through it. So what you call things will affect my experience of how to do that. Formatting considerations, breaking up text, utilizing other things besides words because we are so incredibly visually stimulated, and then linking to other bits of information as necessary. So moving forward this week, I've talked a little bit about the fact that you have the Writing for the Web activity. It's an awesome Linda. I ask you to create a couple pieces to watch the Linda and then to create a couple of pieces of content based on what it is that you learned in that. You have a content management system exploration. Now this is your Thursday night's activity. And what you're asked to do is to take a look at a number of content management systems: Wix, Weebly, WordPress, Squarespace. You can look at Dreamweaver or Muse or anything that you potentially want to build your Real Deal Taco website with. I want you to take a look at what's out there. You're not limited to those that I just talked about either. Those are the big ones that most students tend to use, but I've had students use all kinds of different site building services. You're going to look at all of the different options, and then you're going to make a choice that says, I'm going to use this one to build my Real Deal Taco site. And I have you go ahead and start the process by putting the logo into that CMS and some information in the footer. And I do that because it forces you to start this process on Thursday night instead of Sunday night when your site is due. Because what I hear from students is that there is a certain amount of onboarding time that it takes, like when you get into one of these systems, Wix, Weebly, Squarespace, it doesn't matter, that you have to spend some time learning how to use this before you can just rock and roll and start like building a site. You have to understand the features, the functionality, how to navigate that space, how to add images, how to add text, how to like launch a template, how to change a template when you decide that it's not the one you want. And it takes a little bit of time. I consistently hear that. And so this activity is meant to do two things. One, to get you to research which one of these do I feel most comfortable with, or which one do I want to challenge myself with. Maybe I used Wix for another class and I didn't love it, so I'm going to try Weebly this time. Totally fine. The second thing that it's designed to do is to get you started in this process early. Now, what I see is that students, when they do this on Thursday night, start to have fun. They're like, actually, this is kind of a cool assignment, building this website, because it's plug and play. I've been given all this content, and now I just get to kind of arrange it in a strategically awesome way. And by the time that I'm going in and checking what you guys did on Thursday night, many of you have almost really fully completed your sites because you just are enjoying it that much. So know that that is the intention of the assignment. Your full site is due on Sunday night for your Real Deal Taco scenario. Please know that I know for many of you, this might be the first complete website that you've ever built. And I will go over these sites in great detail with you to provide positive, productive feedback for how you can continually push this to its best place so that it can be an example of strategic design for your portfolio. You will get a lot of feedback, even if it's a great, designed site. I'm still going to go through these sites one by one and to give you guys feedback on what it is that you submit. The reason why I spend so much time doing that is because in week 3, you're building a portfolio site for yourself, which might sound like more fun, but it's actually not as easy at all. Because not only are you the web designer, but you're also the client and you're also the content developer for that site. In this scenario, you're just the web designer, right? But I give you the feedback that I do on the Real Deal Taco site because generally they are broader concepts or lessons that I'm hoping that you will immediately turn around and extrapolate and apply to what you're building for yourself for your portfolio site. Make sense? Does anybody have any questions about any of the information shared during this brief micro lecture? All right. If that's the case, then I am going to thank you for paying so close attention. For those of you online, if you do have any questions, you can feel free to post them here in this class messaging thread, and I will get an answer to you and the entire group. Thanks, guys.